Thanks again for joining us for the Replatform podcast. It's myself, James Gerd, and my co-host, Paul Rogers. Hello, mate. How are you?
I am good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. We're hoping the Wi-Fi stays connected for this recording.
Hopefully we'll get on a bit better this time.
Exactly. So we've got another cracking episode today. We are talking about scalable technology, what's driving Rapha's global e-commerce growth. So very, very cool, interesting brand for you today. So a bit of preamble, then we'll introduce our guest. Rapha was founded in 2004 in London, the goal of making the world's finest cycling clothing, and for beginners through to cycling professionals. And the brand's been growing rapidly online, and technology is inevitably a key driver of that. So today we're talking to Rapha's technology director, Ben, about the technologies they use and how they're using to support and drive growth. So it should be a cracking episode for you. Key things we're going to cover is what does the tech and engineering team look like? What technology is behind Rapha Cycling Club, and why is the business heading in a specific direction? Why is it looking at the technology it is, etc. So welcome to the podcast, Ben. How are you?
Thank you very much, James. Pleasure to be here. I am very well.
Amazing. I'm glad to hear it. So before we start asking you annoying questions, do you want to give our audience a bit of an introduction, who you are, what you do at Rapha, and also for those who don't know Rapha as well, what is the brand, what does it represent, and what does it sell?
Sure, that's a lot to talk about. But yeah, I'm Ben. I'm the technology director at Rapha, as you said. I've been with the company for 5 years now. And yeah, Rapha is a brand. We're very global. We are incredibly multifaceted. We pride ourselves on the bringing together of content, commerce, and community, the 3 C's as we call them. And yeah, we just try and bring that to life for a global footprint of cyclists. And our mission is to make cycling the most popular sport in the world. That's our long-term stretch goal.
Amazing. That's a big, ambitious goal. I like it.
It is. It's a big, hairy, audacious goals, we call them.
Yeah, hairy, audacious goals. I've not heard them described that way. That's good. So ready for some questions then?
Absolutely. Fire away.
Great. I'll ask the first one. Good to see you're on brand as well with your Rapha hoodie.
I am indeed. Yeah, always representing.
Great. So if we just start off with, maybe if you can just give us an overview on some of the technologies you use as part of the kind of overall kind of overarching stack. So e-com, maybe in-store, the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So starting with e-commerce, we're on SAP Hybris in a self-hosted mode at the moment. So we're using that for a lot of things at the moment in a sort of monolith architecture. So that powers the e-com site and is a kind of source of truth for a lot of data. We have our own in-house mobile applications that we develop. They're native on iOS and Android, and that is the app that brings together everyone in the Rapha Cycling Club, the RCC, which is our 20,000 plus member global cycling club. And yeah, I mean, we use a ton of other technologies sort of integrated with the SAP stack. So we use Microsoft Navision Dynamics for our ERP behind that. We use Amplience for content delivery, for asset hosting as well. We host everything on the Hybris side on AWS, and then that all sits behind Cloudflare, which lets us be fast and global because we need to be able to serve customers from as far away as the west coast of the US all the way to Australia. So yeah, we always have to be quite conscious of the reach that we have and make sure that we're performant everywhere. Over the last couple of years, we've adopted Exponea as our CRM CDP platform. So trying to bring together a single view of the customer, whether they reach us through the website or through one of our clubhouses, of which we have 20 or so dotted around the world as well. So yeah, there are a lot of exciting challenges that come about just through how global we are and how diverse our kind of touch points are with customer experience.
And can you just talk us through the role of the native apps? I think that's a particularly interesting one. Like, does that work with Hybris, and like how kind of broad are the apps?
So they do work with Hybris. I mean, certainly for authentication. So Hybris kind of acts as an authentication kind of backend for them, but they are separate to a shopping experience. They're largely to provide a lot of what we see as community. So yeah, as I mentioned, we have over 20,000 members now in the Rapha Cycling Club, and they're all around the world. And the app is what helps bring them together. So it allows them to join and create rides in their local areas, see local events that we might be running, or local ride leaders that we empower might be running in their areas. And yeah, there's just tons of benefits they can get through the app. So we've got in-app chat and all that kind of thing, so they can meet each other. And the real power of the cycling club is when they kind of flywheel works properly, and they're all sort of working off each other, and we're not just having to feed and continuously foster that community, but it grows by itself.
Great. And then two other quick questions. So the clubhouses. So I've been to your the Soho one a few times and the Spitalfields one. How do they fit into all of this? Like, how does that integrate with the e-com store and the app? Yeah, that one first, actually.
That's a really interesting question. It's a huge challenge for us because at the moment they are technologically quite separated. I mean, they do obviously come together at some level, but from a customer experience point of view, they are quite separate. So that's a huge part of our roadmap at the moment, is to bring those elements together. But yeah, the clubhouse as a whole, they're massively important for us. They are the forefront of our brand. It's where people typically interact with us face to face. So yeah, they're all about bringing together cyclists. They're hubs for their communities. They're where RCC chapters are based. So they're not just sort of shops in a conventional sense. But so as I mentioned, we're on a mission to weave the offline and the online aspects of the customer experience together. So that's one of our big roadmap pieces at the moment, as I said, is to move more into an omni-channel direction so that we can interweave those online offline experiences. Like, we should be able to tell when you've been visiting a clubhouse, whether it's Soho or wherever, and tailor your experience accordingly based on your profile.
That makes sense. And sticking with that kind of omni-channel theme, how have you found Exponea, and kind of what stage are you at in terms of kind of using Exponea for that kind of broader omni-channel view of the customer?
Oh, we found it. I mean, it's incredibly flexible, very powerful. It's not sort of particularly opinionated in how it works. So we've been able to really leverage it as a sort of toolkit and build it into exactly the kind of experience that we need to deliver. So we're using it at the moment for all our marketing emails. We've got plans to bring it into the fold for the transactional email side as well, and that would be both web and through clubhouses. So that's still in the works, but yeah, something we're definitely working towards.
Cool. A question on that then. So you've got your e-commerce stack and SAP. You've got other technologies involved in the clubhouse. You've got Exponea from a CRM marketing point of view. How do you manage the development teams around that? Because there's quite a diverse set of skills. So how much is in-house? Because I know you've got development and engineering capability now, versus how much is through external partners to get the scale you need?
So everything covered so far is all handled in-house. We have a team of a total technology team of 30, and of that 20 are developers and engineers across mobile, web, and so on. So yeah, we aim to handle everything in-house. We found that that's the best way to obviously retain knowledge within the company over a long period of time, and also really to deliver the best possible experiences that we can, because there's always challenges when that's outsourced through an agency relationship or something. Then it's just a bit harder to hang on to the high standards that we set for ourselves in terms of delivering experiences. So yeah, I think in terms of scale, like, that's always a challenge. There's always n+1 things to go after, and we're limited on resource. So there's always a challenge to temper our expectations and our appetites, but that's something we're trying to get better at over time. But yeah, we have a very multidisciplinary team who we're moving to be more generic in their approach. So a lot of these web technologies that things like Exponea integrate with, the integration between any of these systems is ultimately just connecting APIs together, which we're doing increasingly through our own middleware that we're building out in a serverless architecture. So yeah, we're gradually becoming a bit more service oriented and decoupling some of these big systems and trying to link them together with common bits of technology that we own. Therefore, we're in a better place to integrate with new systems, new services that come along that we might find we need as we grow and as our business changes and evolves. But also it gives us the ability to swap things out if we want to, and we retain that sort of connectivity between systems.
Cool. So you just mentioned building out your own middleware. Is that proprietary? You're not using a third-party middleware and extending it then, so you're building it out yourself?
Correct. Yes, there's a running theme here where it probably sounds like we make life a bit difficult for ourselves, but yeah, we're building that out on AWS using their serverless tech stack. So it's all kind of from scratch, more or less.
Interesting.
It allows it to be very, very simple, very lean, and we sort of start with the bare basics and then add to it as we go.
So what's the end goal? I think this is a really interesting area because I know other businesses who've gone down the middleware route, but they've bought it in. Not so many are building out their own, but also some agencies have created proprietary middlewares for this specific reason. So is the end goal that literally everything from a data transfer point of view will go through the middleware?
That's likely to be the case. I mean, there are certain scenarios where it just makes more sense to connect point to point from system A to system B. But for the most part, yes, we would ultimately have everything going through the middleware. It just allows us to be the owners and the gatekeepers of how all that data moves. We can put all the monitoring and analytics and business insights that we need into that as well. So that can feed out from that at the point of transaction or whenever things are happening. So yeah, it just provides us a huge amount of flexibility that we control, and that's our proprietary piece.
Yeah, it sounds really, really cool. So James and I have talked quite a lot about building out in-house technology teams, and it's a bit of a theme at the moment, particularly amongst kind of high growth D2C brands. What advice do you have for people looking at this at the moment, and kind of how have you kind of progressed that over time from when you first started?
Sure. I think we've had to do a lot of growing up. And we're not a technology company, so it's always hard to compete on the market with other tech companies who are, especially in London, where we're based, where it's an incredibly competitive market for technologists and engineers. But yeah, we've just had to make sure that we're following industry best practices and patterns, just making ourselves a very attractive place to work and work on some very cool things, and being a market leading brand clearly helps with that as well. We get a lot of interest from people in all fields who happen to be cyclists, and we're pretty magnetic as far as that goes. So yeah, I think my advice would be work on developer culture, like focus on developer experience. A lot of e-commerce environments tend to be a bit limited in terms of you're just plugging system A to system B, and it's not that exciting from a development point of view. Whereas if you can actually own a chunk of the stack and develop that in-house as bespoke software, or particularly if you have a very tailored, as we do, front end, the storefront itself is proprietary as well, and we invest a lot into the design and experience there, then that provides a lot more fun, quite honestly, just to work on. And we find that keeps us going quite a lot.
So you say the storefront's proprietary. What's the storefront built in then? I'm assuming it's all managed in-house then.
Correct. Yeah. So at the moment in production, we have the site that you'll see today is rendered directly out of Hybris. So it is a Hybris storefront, but it's one that when I was part of the team that was building it, and we just kind of more or less binned all of the default templates, emptied them all out, and started from scratch, just so that we could inject our own view of what the shopping experience could be, and not have it overly limited by a standard set of journeys and layouts. And yeah, we're on the way towards decoupling that now. So with another huge roadmap piece for us is the move to headless, and that will obviously involve a completely separate front end application that we're building.
Excellent. Well, we've got a few questions on that because everyone's obsessed with headless mode. So we'd love to hear practically what that means and why. So we'll come back to that. It sounds very interesting. One of the most impressive things about Rapha is the cycling club, which we touched upon earlier. That community bit is one of the core pillars of the 3 Cs. It was founded in 2015, and I think from what I read, there's more than 17,000 members worldwide, which is which is significant numbers. What does the technology look like behind that? Is that separate to Hybris, right? So how is that? Or is that part of Hybris?
So, all of those members they have accounts within Hybris, so they effectively have an account with the website, for want of a better way of putting it. And then, yes, their experience doesn't necessarily have to be through anything digital. There's plenty of people who would purchase the membership and then just experience it through the clubhouses in a sort of offline capacity. But it really comes into its own when you're participating in rides and things which are largely coordinated through the mobile application that we build. So yeah, it's a combination of those two things, and largely the mobile application kind of sits by itself. It has its own back-end stack that delivers APIs to the mobile apps. And yeah, that's also on AWS using technology like GraphQL and right. So on to provide all the data that the app needs. And
how close is the integration between app and commerce from a Hybris point? Are you using APIs to pull in commerce elements, or is that app meant to be something different than a commerce-driven solution?
So it's currently quite different. It's very much focused on the community side and less so on the commerce. We have, over the last year, we've begun exploring how we might introduce commerce a little bit through product suggestions and announcements of new launches, which has been quite successful. Certainly something we could explore, but we do want to make sure that we're focusing on the experience of Rapha as a whole and not just selling, because we're about much more than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess before we start talking a bit more about that kind of headless stack, what are some of the other key tech projects or kind of bigger moves you've made around technology over the last couple of years?
So the middleware piece is a huge one for us. Like that's completely flipped everything on its head, from taking an off-the-shelf product and just customizing loosely around the edges to taking an off-the-shelf product, but then not touching it as much as we possibly can and building absolutely everything on top and separate from it. So that's a huge technological and cultural shift for us. It's completely transformed how we have to go about the very practice of engineering. It's new tools, it's new techniques, it's new. It's pushed us further in directions that we already wanted to go in, towards continuous integration and deployment and automation and all those good things. So yeah, that's been a huge one. We migrated as well the infrastructure that we host on from private virtualized infrastructure where we used to be to clouds with Amazon. So that's also been, that was a mammoth undertaking for the team, because we were sitting on a very, very old legacy almost deployment method, which was many, many years of history and changes baked into a lot of configuration and customization of how the application itself was deployed. And it was a big undertaking to lift and shift that across. So that's been pretty big for us as well, because it's allowed us to become scalable for the first time with the e-commerce side. So we can now, even though we have a monolith application, we can to some degree scale it up and down depending on retail kind of peaks and troughs. So that's been pretty powerful for us too. So yeah, those are a couple of big ones. There's all sorts of others. We've had some amazing projects which are kind of facilitating other things that the brand is working on. So from the tech perspective, one really interesting one last year was the collaboration that we did with Palace Skateboards for Team EF, one of the pro teams that we sponsor. And yeah, like just going from being a kind of always on e-commerce site to suddenly having to facilitate a hypey drop of just a handful of products that would all be sold within seconds in some cases was quite a big shift. And we actually had to put a queuing system in place for that just so that we could stay online basically and cater to the need.
Yeah, that will make sense. And then going back to that headless piece that you mentioned, what made you go down this route, given that you've kind of managed to move away from kind of standard templating within SAP? And what were your main objectives?
So although we moved away from the standard templating, as you say, I think we're still tethered just by the nature of a monolith, right? We can only release on a fairly slow cadence. Even if we're really pushing forward, we'll do one every 2 weeks, which is incredibly slow by any kind of modern standard. So just the ability to gain that flexibility, that ability to change at a shorter time frame, and to be able to run a culture of experimentation, which we've not hitherto been able to do very well. So just trialing different changes to the site and seeing what works from a conversion rate optimization point of view. That's kind of what we're aiming for. So yeah, it's largely about becoming agile. Ultimately, any new presentation that's based on the same content or the same combinations of content and commerce, we should be able to do that with a very small deployment to the site, and that should be something that could happen multiple times a day. So that's what we're aiming towards with that whole move.
Fantastic. And you talked a little bit a minute ago around kind of the monolithic kind of SAP ecom platform. Do you intend to kind of further decouple that ecom stack, or do you have any kind of intention to move platform? What's the kind of, what else are you kind of looking to do around that stack?
So at the moment, we're still happy to use it as the sort of what's the word, like the sort of combined e-commerce platform. So we wouldn't separate it out just yet into things like product management and order management, at least not as far as we're planning to at the moment. So the main plan is to move to the newer model, which is their Commerce Cloud product, where they basically provide it to you as if it was a bit of SaaS, and you just consume APIs from it, and it's hosted by them in the cloud, and yeah, you don't have to get involved in the business of customizing and running and operating an e-commerce platform, which is ultimately not what we're about. We want to be much more focused on the experience end of the stack.
Yes, so a question for me, because obviously as the technology director, you're straddling across the technical strategy and the business capability and that kind of classic T-shaped piece. And something that business stakeholders often struggle to understand is, when everyone talks about this, is why headless setups enable agile deployments and increased cadence. I'd really love to hear from your point of view, like what fundamentally changes and how does it enable you to work quicker?
Sure. So I think for me, it's a separation of concerns. So at the moment, with a monolith, we have everything sitting in one massive code base in one big application connected to one big database. So to paint a clear picture, if we were to go in and change something, literally anything, like move the logo a pixel to the left or something, because that code change sits in the same code base as our checkout logic, there is a risk, however slight, that we would impact unintentionally something quite critical. So yeah, that just means that we have to be quite careful with any change that we make, and also just the scale of the application itself. Like, it takes hours to deploy any kind of change, even if it's something like changing a bit of CSS, as I mentioned, for the front end. That's still a huge deployment that needs to happen. So by separating that piece out into a lightweight front end application that can be deployed in, let's say, a minute or two, you enable this process of making much faster, more frequent changes. And you don't have to touch or interfere with the underlying business logic that sits in the back end. That can be perfectly happy being released once a month, let's say, because that logic doesn't really need to change all that often.
Yeah, I think thanks. That's a really nice way of explaining it to people. So it's time to deploy, faster to get the code out, and dependencies. And I guess one of the key benefits to development teams is reducing the complexity of QA for releasing code and being confident that things haven't screwed up somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're just deploying one service or one application, you only have to worry about testing the things that service is concerned with, plus its integrations. Like, you don't have to test everything in your entire business as we do at the moment with every change that we make.
And what advice could you give other people who might be thinking about this, starting this process? How do you scope this? How do you know what to prioritize? And what thought process did you go through internally to decide, do you know what, this is the areas we need to decouple first?
That's a big question.
I think questions at the end.
I noticed. I think, I mean, it largely depends, unfortunately, on what the current stack is and what the path forward is in terms of gaining any kind of flexibility or headless approach. So, replatforming from one stack to another is always challenging, especially if you're moving vendor as far as the ecom platform goes. That's always going to make it much harder. But if the ecom platform you're on already provides APIs, let's say in the case of Shopify, if you already use a Shopify provided storefront and you want to go to Shopify Plus, let's say, and start decoupling, the API is already there, your data is already there. That's a kind of simple use case. So yeah, I mean, with any big project, the aim is always to try and break it down and release in stages rather than have to disappear for a year at a time and then emerge at the end of it with something new, which is hugely risky from all sorts of angles. So yeah, I'd say the advice I'd give is just try and break down, for the specific path that you're on, try and break down the project of going headless into smaller pieces if you can. Like if you can go to a more modular approach where you release certain sections of the site into a headless application, you can have them running side by side for a while. It allows you to gain some learnings sooner from going down that path. Then yeah, that de-risks it and hopefully makes it a bit simpler.
Yeah, I think risk is a key point, because these aren't simple. They sound simple when everyone talks about them in the industry, but you're right, they are complex and it's a mentality shift. I'd love to know, I don't know whether you're willing to answer this question, but what are the key issues you've had to overcome as a technology team in this process, and what did you learn from them?
So I think I kind of touched on it earlier. So that cultural change of looking after an off-the-shelf application and customizing it is one way to approach the problem of running an e-commerce stack. And the technology team that you set up for that versus being a service-oriented thing where you've got multiple pieces of software which are all separated but integrated through APIs, those are two very different problems, and you need two very different types of teams, lots of different expertise in order to support each. So yeah, we've had to learn that with the same set of people, evolving and going through training and trial and error over that period of time. So I think that's been the biggest challenge for us. And we're still not through it. Yeah, we're still sort of learning things every day as we go, still adapting everything from the tools that we use to our very org structure and how the team is actually set up to kind of pave our way through that and support the new way of working in a more service-oriented fashion.
Yeah, and linked to that, you said about the changing of skill sets and having to kind of adapt, I guess, working practices in the development side, and you talked about having to keep people motivated through interesting projects. I'd love to know, like, where's the team going? Like, is it just about continuing to build out all of the subject matter expertise, or are you more focused on like front end versus back end?
So that's a really interesting question and very timely, because we're wrestling with that right now. So we have historically been set up in a discipline separated kind of way. So we're a front end team, a back end team, and so on. But increasingly, because of the blurring of lines between what is front end and what is back end, especially when you get into the middleware piece, we've found that we need to just break some of those boundaries, start working more together as a more cohesive team, and not think of things as this is the front end piece and this is the back end piece. It all sort of blurs together. So yeah, we're starting to toy with the idea of how we might move towards feature teams or product teams who look after specific areas of functionality. So let's say we could have one around content and commerce that's an always-on team, and they have a backlog of their own that is fed through multiple sources. But yeah, they're just an always-on team that is multidisciplinary, and they can go after different challenges there. And then we'll have others that focus on other things like fulfillment or payments and that kind of thing.
Oh, that's really interesting, actually, because in the same way that e-commerce teams have gone down that route, things like digital marketing expertise, merchandising and traders, SEOs. That's really, really interesting. Fantastic. Paul, did you have any more questions? Because that's covered everything I wanted to ask today.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, really interesting episode. Really good guest. I can't really think of anything else to ask, to be honest, but it sounds like you've got some really good projects coming up. And maybe we should do another one of these episodes at some point. Hear how you get on with the headless piece and the middleware. We can do the retrospective in 6 months, 12 months time.
How's the middleware looking and how far is the decoupling going? It's been really, Ben, really appreciate you taking the time. It's such a cool brand, and I think people really enjoy hearing from the challenges and the processes that brands like Rapha are going through.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And it's also good to talk through some of the problems and challenges and things we've learned. It actually helps see how far we've come as well.
There you go. It's a free counselling session on a Friday.
Yeah, free therapy, always good, always good.
And thanks as always to everyone who's listened in. Keep an ear out for our next episode and let us know of any topics you'd like us to cover. And please do subscribe if you haven't, or give us a rating on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We really do appreciate it. Also, helps improve our visibility, which gives us the encouragement to keep on producing these episodes. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.